Okay, recording. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this fall gardening class. My name is Christian Acosta, agriculture educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Allegany County, and I'm happy to present this gardening class. Today, we're going to be learning about fall gardening tasks, harvest and preservation methods, and how to clean and prepare your garden for the winter, and some soil amendments if necessary. Some soil amendments for the garden. So some of these activities that probably they are like obvious that we can do that if you are passionate about that, if you have a lot of experience. So it's nice sometimes a good refreshment. If not, if you're a beginner, so probably you find this useful because sometimes we can fall in couple mistakes during the fall. About your garden and about harvesting and about a couple things that we're going to be talking today. So let's just start with the first one, and it's harvesting. Oh, okay. Before going deep into the class, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute your microphone or in the chat you can ask, and I will be answering the questions. So the first task that we do is harvesting, right? So let me check that. Yeah, it's recording. So harvesting. So yeah, it's something so simple that even a kid can be harvesting, right? Just yeah, not a lot of science behind that, but still we need to do it properly to avoid the plant damage and also to avoid just the damage not only for the plant when we need to keep harvesting, but also for the product that we are harvesting. So in that case, this is time when it's the time. This is the time of the year to be harvesting like kale, spinach, cauliflower, broccoli, these plants that they like cold temperatures. So the best time is before the first hard frost. So but there is an exception for the first hard frost, and we can see here in the picture. So beets and carrots, it's better to harvest after the first hard frost because in that way it's a little sweeter. So the plant feels that it's getting too cold, and then all these nutrients and sugar, it's going to go to the roots. So in that case, the carrots, the beets, we can use the cold temperature as an advantage to have some sweeter vegetables, some sweeter beets, in this case, beets and carrots. And also the proper techniques to avoid the plant damage. So what techniques exactly? So some of these ones is, for example, for root vegetables like the carrots and beets, and just gently lose the soil around them. So if that's not a problem with your garden, if you have the texture in your garden, the soil is usually soft, it doesn't get too hard, like compacted. In that case, no problem about that. But you can be doing it just like with a garden fork before pulling the carrots or the beets. You can um, be moving the soil or even using that garden fork like to help to harvesting, so you don't need to pull the plant, especially even for the carrots, especially when it's to sell, because it's just commercially it looks beautiful with the whole plant. So it's mostly about that. Just be careful with the fork, get the garden fork, not to damage or break the carrots or the beets. Now, some techniques for leafy greens like kale, spinach, even arugula at some point, or lettuce that we have like this. So in that case, we can be harvesting just with scissors or just pinching gently and taking some of the leaves and allowing the plant to keep growing more because for example, lettuce, spinach, kale, they like the cold temperature, so no problem about that. You can allow the plant to keep regrowing and keep harvesting from the plant. But if you want just only one harvest, so no problem about that. Just you can pull the plant or cut the whole plant. And about cabbage and broccoli, in that case, you can cut the heads and then allow for regrowth. But in this case, for this area, Allegany County, so we don't have a lot of time for the regrowth. So in that case, unless you are growing in a pot indoors or under greenhouse that is not too cold, and it's not going to be too cold, so that can be possible. It grows again. Even you have seen probably at some point in magazines or some videos online how you can even cut the plant, the broccoli or the lettuce, and use that little stem from the root and put that in water, just the bottom of this stem and touching the water, and then it grows new roots and then start regrowing again. So that's possible. That's a method that you can be doing. And well, about cucurbitaceae, like cucurbits, like pumpkins, squash, watermelon. You can cut, well, we're not harvesting watermelon this time of the year, but it's that family of plants. For this time of the years, like squash and pumpkins, we can be harvesting even zucchinis. If you still have your zucchini plants, you can see that they are still producing some zucchinis. This time of the year, they tolerate that cold temperature. So when you harvest them, allow the plant to heal. And how is to do that? The plant, no, the fruit to heal, and it's cutting here. So cutting about 2 to 3 inches above the squash in this case. So in that case, it completely dries in that notch, and it doesn't allow bacteria or fungus to go into the squash. So if it's too long, so probably even that stem start decomposing. So not too long, like this example here, you can see that even in this picture, it's turning yellow. So it can be normal, but sometimes if it's too long, you can have some problem with bacteria or fungus. So in that case, just 2 to 3 inches, that's it. And then you can have pumpkins and squash out even over the counter, not even in the refrigerator, and you can have that for months, and it's not decomposing, it's not rotting, it's a nice way to preserve. Timing, so for, like I mentioned before, like for most of the vegetables, before the first hard frost, and for the sweeter roots like the beets and carrots, so after the first frost. Okay, now preserving, that's another task that we can be doing during this time of the year. So some preserving methods, probably we all know about them, like freezing, canning, drying, the roots, cellar storage. So it sounds easy, but especially when you're new to this, and it's like, it sounds easy. I know everybody, or well, every gardener or most of the gardeners do it, but I don't know how. So no worries about that. So for example, freezing, it's best for like tomatoes, beans, green beans, peppers, fruits. So if you have any fruit, apples, grapes, you can be freezing. No problem about that. The only recommendation is washing everything first and then put it in Ziploc bags or any container and directly to the freezer. What about herbs? So that's a question that sometimes I get about herbs. So yeah, we can be freezing herbs. So what is the secret or the key for that is about blanching the herbs first. So what is blanching? If it's the first time you hear something like that, blanching is just boiling water and throwing the herbs there for about 15 30 seconds tops, like no more than 30 seconds. And then after that, taking the herbs out of the boiling water and put directly in a very cold water. It can be a container with ice, so that's fine, and very cold. So very hot and then cold, and then allowing the herbs to dry completely, like to be dry, and then you can use even the vacuum sealed method and put in the freezer. Or if you don't want that, you can just do the blanching, and then put some water. Even there are some methods about using the ice cubes, so putting some herbs in there and freezing that. So when you're cooking, you can add these ice cubes with the herbs in it, um, and that works because the key is that when you take the herbs out of the freezer, don't allow them to thaw completely, because in this process is when they turn brown and mushy and it looks just not nice to eat, even when they can be good and the flavor is there, and it's still good to eat, but just the texture and visual is not that nice. So in that case, and don't wait until it's completely like thawed and just frozen. Uh, Put directly in the sauce or in whatever you're cooking. In that way, you can still have the green color or a little bit brown, but not like disgusting looking, because sometimes it looks like if it's completely like it's rotten, or like it's nice and the flavor is there, but you don't want to eat that. So that's the key for freezing herbs. And for canning, that's ideal for the jams, pickles, and for many vegetables, even meat, poultry, and um, a lot of recipes, many recipes. So I'm gonna talk about canning in the next slide. Um, so drying, uh, it's easy to do with herbs, with fruits, some vegetables. I don't think vegetables like drying, but mostly herbs, right? With the herbs and some fruits to put in the drinks, etc. So it's good to do it with a dehydrator. If you have the dehydrator, it's something easy. It's just to hang those ones with paper bags and hang in a dark room, dark and dry room, and that's a good method to be drying the herbs. Or sometimes the oven, a very low temperature, like 100, 120 degrees, so you can be drying some herbs. Um, it depends the herbs, so you need to consult that before start the drying process. In the root cellar storage, so for long lasting, just taking advantage of the cold months during the winter, so you can be doing something like this, especially like onions, potatoes, carrots, some of these ones that you can store, even no need to freeze or anything, just use the cold temperature. Now, about I mentioned before, canning. So for canning, there are two methods that you can see here, one to the left, one to the right. Which one to use? It depends about the pH. So what is the pH? It's just a range where we measure how acidic or alkaline anything. It can be, in this case, food, but we also can test the soil, water, anything. We really can take the pH of almost everything. So in this case, for the food, we have for acidic food, so um, most of the fruits, like for example, for pickles, for jelly, even tomatoes, for all of these ones, most of the fruits, we can use the boiling method, boiling canning. Um, that's simple. You don't need to go for the pressure canner. So if you're just growing tomatoes or you want to make your own jelly or your jam, some pickles, or any fruit, that's fine, just boiling. But for the ones that they are low acidic, so mostly like alkaline, so in that case, meat, in general, meat, poultry, beef, chicken, any meat, stew, vegetables, most of the vegetables. So for these ones, you need, in that case, the method with pressure cooker, and it's about temperature. So with the pressure cooker, not only we get high temperature, but also the pressure in there is higher than just boiling. So a question, for tomatoes, pickles, or fruits, can we use the pressure canner? Yes, we can do that. So yeah, it's just that it's not necessary. So in that case, if you're going to be growing or just canning your fruits and making jam, jelly, pickles, some tomatoes, tomato sauce, etc., in that case, you don't need to go and buy a pressure canner because sometimes they can be expensive. There are some cheaper ones, but it's about safety. So I highly recommend to get a good one and just avoid some safety problems because of course we have a lot of pressure inside. So it's better to have a good one. But a good one, it can be a couple $100. So that's why if you're only gonna do something like this, the fruits and tomatoes, uh, just boiling, because a boiler like this, it can be perfectly like $20, 20 something. You can find some very cheap ones. And in that case, you don't need to reach some pressure or anything like that. So it's just about boiling. Um, just when you're boiling, make sure that the water covers about 1 to 2 inches above the cans. And that will be it. Just follow the recipe. Usually you follow a recipe for canning, if it's for sauce, for anything that you want. But it's about this, the pH. So take that in mind. If you have any questions, Cornell Cooperative Extension can help you with that. In that case, I'm mostly into the horticulture, gardening area. So, but the Snapet educator, she can help even more about preserving food. The next task, so cleaning the garden. So that is something that's a mistake that it's easy to to think that because naturally the plants are dying, so they go back, or you can just pull them and allow the plant to be over the soil, and that's it. So just let the plants die in there. So that's a mistake that we can be doing every year. And why is a mistake? Because, well, that's the natural process, right? But when we are just naturally, if you allow the plant to be there and naturally decompose and go back to the soil, that can be taking a couple years. So just think about um, the sunflowers or some plants that if you don't touch them, they can be there even dry and dead for even the next season, 1 or 2 years, or even more than that. So when we want to grow anything next season, so then is when we have some problems. Because when we allow the debris and plants to be there, just dead in there, just right now, this time of the year, probably you notice that your tomatoes, peppers, and the herbs, most of the plants that they start turning brown and dying, they get a lot of mildew, any disease that you see the leaves being completely attacked and being um, covered with any fungus, any disease. So in that case, because the plant is weak. So in that case, the fungus are happy because the plant is very just susceptible and they can be eating the plant, but same time they are producing a lot of spores. So thousands, even millions of spores. And these spores, they are gonna be there in the garden, there over the dead plants. And next season, when you're growing again your sunflowers, your tomatoes, and again growing your plants, then you have tons of spores there, and you notice that year after year, your plants are getting like weaker or easily attacked. So it's not that they are weak or easily attacked. It's just that we have tons of spores there. So we call that a pressure for a pressure from the fungus. So in that case, we have a lot of spores, and it's hard for the plant to be healthy and alive when there are thousands or even millions of spores trying to go into the plant and start a disease. So that's why it's better just to remove all of that. And you can, especially when they are with mildew, with any disease that you can see the spots um, of the fungus. So in that case, it's better just to take that, don't compost that, don't put that in your compost. Just take that and you can be burning or garbage bag and far from the garden. That's the best way to do it. And cleaning your even in this case like the raised beds or your garden in general, just cleaning. Even if you don't want like the soil completely exposed, something that you can be doing is a cover crop. So with rye or with clover, so you can plant some cover crops when you're harvesting early during the summer, and then planting some cover crops that also help to improve the nitrogen in the soil. If you want to be composting, so make sure that any of that plants, leaves, or debris from the garden, so in that case, make sure that they are healthy. So they are just probably getting dry, brown, but not really with mildew and a lot of bacteria, fungi growing over the plant. So if they are healthy, so okay. Or some of these peppers, tomatoes that they cracked, especially tomatoes, when too much water and they crack. Um, so these cracked tomatoes, but they are healthy. They are not, they crack because it's too much water and not because of a disease. So in that case, anything that is healthy, you can put it in the compost. Just make sure that your compost pile, or even some of these composters or small compost bins at home, um, make sure that you have a ratio between green and browns. So what is that, green and browns? The green is everything like in the kitchen, for example, food scraps, and that the banana peel that you're chopping, some vegetables, some fruits, and anything that is healthy but you're not eating, you can put that in the compost. So that is a green material. And the browns is, for example, right now we have a lot of browns because the plants, the trees, all the leaves, the plants are dying, the leaves are falling. So all of that is brown material. So you can see even the color, right? It's brown. And also brown material can be soil, the soil from the garden, potting mix. So if you don't have browns, because probably not trees around or any brown material, so make sure that if you put any food scraps or anything green, you also add browns on top. So ideally, it would be 80% of the browns, that for this time of the year is easy with all the leaves, and 20% of greens. So that is why, I don't know, if at some point you have something like this at home, a composter, that they are nice and they are fancy and sometimes a little expensive, but you add only the food scraps, only green material. So then you open that and it's like disgusting. It smells terrible and it's not really a compost. It's just decomposing, fermenting some of that material there. So in that case, it's not a good compost, because in that case, we need to add some brown material, even when we are composting indoors. So the compost usually doesn't have any smell. So in that case, we need to make sure that we have this ratio, or at least 50-50%. So 50% browns, 50% in greens. And that would be it. It's not in turning your compost every now and then, and that's it. It's easy to be composting even indoors. So with some small composter, of course, with a lid. So in the first couple of weeks, some of the smells, it's not attracting any flies or any insects around. And what to compost, but not to compost, is about anything that is healthy and organic material. So you can be adding that to the compost. Vegetables, the house plants, the garden debris, healthy when they are healthy. Um, Kitchen scraps that not cooked, because sometimes we can have the lettuce or spinach or something that I just boil them or add a little bit of oil. So um, in that case, it's some green material, but it's not good to add to the compost. So anything but healthy, anything organic, healthy, and no cooked, something raw. About coffee. So for coffee, the coffee from the coffee maker or any coffee grounds, in that case, make sure that it's no more than 5% of the compost. So just a little bit. It's not like if you are making your coffee every day and then putting the coffee to the compost every day, because in that case, we don't it that changes a lot about pH, and at some point the coffee grounds, like they can be um, like a natural herbicide. So in that case, it can not herbicide properly is more like sometimes it repels some of the um, some growth for the plants, so close to an herbicide. So in that case, it's better just no more than 5% of the coffee. And paper, yes, paper, cardboard. Be careful with the cardboard, because if the cardboard has a lot of ink or even plastic, um, some plastic, like a coat with plastic sometimes, or some wax. Some boxes, they come with some wax or plastic to protect the box. So in that case, it's better not to add any of that to the compost. And what not to compost? So meat, anything that has been cooked, fat, oil, cigarettes or medicine, anything not best waste. So at some point you can add to your compost some well-rotted manure, not even fresh manure from cows or horses. So just some well-rotted manure, and that can work as a brown material for your compost. But other than that, no cheese, no nothing like that, and nothing with diseases or weeds, because sometimes the weeds, even if they look dry and like it's dead, but it's easy for the weeds sometimes to take over the compost pile, and that is hard to control later. So that's about the composting. And now soil testing. um, okay, so soil testing, what is that? Easy, is just take a sample and to send to the laboratory, and in that way we know how healthy can be our soil. So why? Because this is the base for healthy plants. So we have a healthy soil, we have healthy plants, and healthy plants, they tolerate more the fungi, the bacteria, and even changes in the temperature, in environment conditions, etc. So we can be using a home test kit. If you can do it and it's easy to do it, okay, you can be testing your own soil. But it's easier and like more accurate to send the samples to the laboratory, because they have everything to make the reactions and be testing different components of the soil. So how to do that, how to collect the sample is easy. So if you want to learn how to do this, um, in the Cornell Cooperative Extension, Allegany County, in gardening and then soil and soil health, there is a guide. So this is a QR code that you can be reading about that. Basically, it's just taking different samples, like sub-samples, in the garden, and then mixing that in a bucket. And from that mix of soil, just taking one sample that is the representative sample for testing, and then putting that in a Ziploc bag and send to the Cornell Cooperative Extension office, and we send that to the laboratory. And it's that simple, just less than week and a half, for 2 weeks tops. You have your results, and based on the results, you can make some decisions for soil amendments. So what is the soil amendments? Is incorporating organic matter if needed. So if, for example, the organic matter is low, or the nitrogen is low, or the soil doesn't have good nutrition in it, so you can be incorporating organic matter, adjusting the pH. Why is that important? The pH, again, mentioning pH. So in that case, for canning, it was about bacteria growth and to preserve the food. In this case, the pH is because when we have pH that can be too low or too high, so in that case, that affects the absorption of nutrients from the plants. So if the plant, for example, for most of vegetables and fruits, is about a pH between 6 and 7.5, tops 7.5, 7.5, and we have lower than that or higher than that. So even if we add the fertilizer, the plant is starving because the fertilizer can be there, but with a pH very acidic or very alkaline, so the plant cannot really absorb the fertilizer, the nutrients from the soil. So that's why it's important. Even sometimes the plant can be starving, even when we are putting the food in there, the fertilizer. And this is why. So the pH affects that absorption of nutrients. So if it's necessary, but in that case, how to know that? Soil testing. The soil test is going to tell you, yeah, your pH is this. So in that case, okay, if my pH is 5 and I want to grow tomatoes, so I know that for my tomatoes, it's probably, I read, and it's between 6.5 to 7.5. So I need to raise the pH, right? So we can use lime. That's the common one, garden lime, to raise the pH, or sulfur to lower the pH. It's easier to raise the pH than lower the pH. Always is a little challenging to lower the pH. And we can add nutrients based on that. So just recently, I got a sample, a soil sample, and it was for indoor garden, so indoor plants, and it was over fertilized. So a lot of fertilizer in it. So high nitrogen, high potassium, high phosphorus. So in that case, it's like, no, don't keep adding more fertilizer, because yeah, the plants, they are the person who brought the sample said, well, is that the plants are turning yellow. If I read that if they're turning yellow, it's because nitrogen, they need nitrogen, so I add more fertilizer. So in that case, yeah, well, it's the opposite. Too much nitrogen, too much fertilizer. So the plant, it's like too much is burning the plant. So we can burn the plant with a lot of fertilizer. So in that case, this is why we test the soil, and based on the results, we do the soil amendments, that is fertilizing or changing the texture sometimes, like it's we need to add or incorporate more organic matter, so the texture is going to be different. And organic matter can be the compost that we were talking before, can be manure when you are applying manure, so cow manure or horse manure. Chicken, it's debatable. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it's fine. It depends mostly about how they are being fed. So in that case, it's better to avoid um, any contamination problems, also because of the bacteria, virus from the chickens that can easily affect humans too. So just to avoid some of these problems or risks, better just cow manure or horse manure, because we know that they are constantly eating green material out there. So even when we are talking about manure, don't do it when it's fresh, like the first picture. So allow the manure to be well rotted. So just naturally to become like compost, like almost like soil when you touch it, because the smell even is not there anymore. No smell, nothing. The texture is different. Um, so that is a good example, and not when it's fresh, because when it's fresh, it can have not only a lot of bacteria, mostly bacteria, and also it can have a lot of nitrogen, and that can burn the plant. So not recommended. And for mulching, so we can prepare our garden for the winter mulching. In that case, the mulch is good because it helps like a natural layer, a protection to avoid the soil to get too cold, because we still need the bacteria and microorganisms living there to keep the soil healthy. So we avoid that, and we avoid even changing the texture when the period, especially now over the last years, the climate is changing, and we have some winter periods where it's just a constant freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing. So that can really damage the soil texture and the soil health. So in that case, mulching can help to protect the soil, especially from these periods of freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing. And when you're mulching, try to do it with something organic. So nowadays you can see on the stores that they sell like mulch, and it's cheaper, and it's uh, like recycled from the I don't know exactly if it's like a tire. It seems like rubber, like tires from the cars, or well, I'm not sure about that. I don't want to give some information that is not research based, but what I mean is inorganic materials. So it's like rubber, like anything that is not easily going back to the soil, that you cannot just mix with the soil and it's gonna decompose naturally. So even when the straw and leaves and wood chips, they last only for a couple months or 1 season, 2 seasons, well, for a period of time, and then you need to reapply after, I don't know, a year or more than that. Uh, it's better than inorganic materials. So avoid that, because you can be contaminating more, especially when the material is like rubber. And during the summer, that can increase even too much the temperature for the roots of the plants, and that can affect the plant more than protect the plant. So just straw, leaves, hay. Well, the hay, sometimes you need to be careful about the seeds, because that can become like a weed, hard to control sometimes. Um, just straw, some leaves, wood chips, organic material. That's fine. That's easy, and it helps to protect the soil. And like I mentioned before about cover crops, so when you have some cover crops, like for these areas of New York, so easily you can go for clover, rye, vetch, and they grow easily. And you can have them there, like start during the summer, for example, after you're harvesting. So you can plant some of these cover crops, and then you can easily sow in the fall, or in the spring. Just start moving the soil, just when you're preparing the soil, and incorporating this to the soil, covering with soil. So in that case, this helps not only when they are in the soil, but also when they are growing. They help to promote good bacteria that they are helping in the nitrogen cycle. So it helps for nitrogen, and that's nice for the next crops, yeah, to be adding these nutrients. And for the perennials, so our bushes, our trees, and some biennials or even perennials, in that case, we need to protect them. Yesterday I was in a class and I mentioned the key is about consult, just Google, or even asking us about the lowest or minimum temperatures for anything that you want to grow or that you're growing. So if you have blueberries, you have rosemary, you have um, what's the other, parsley, that is, it can be from 1 year to the next one, rhubarb, etc. Always consult the lowest, the minimum temperature. So in that case, you know exactly if that area, that garden, that specific spot where you are growing something, is a good spot for that plant or not. Because sometimes we have sage. So sage, we can have some sage from this area that is already adapted to this area, and it can tolerate 15 degrees Fahrenheit, like the lowest temperature. So no problem if you have 23, 30 degrees, because the plant is going to be there. Even without protecting the plant, it's going to survive. But there are some sage, probably from the south or a different area. So in that case, it's not going to tolerate 15 degrees, but the minimum temperature can be 30. So in that case, the plant can easily die if the temperature drops below 30 degrees. So in that case, we need to protect the plant. So if we know that it's going to be too cold, the minimum temperature is for my plant, so for my perennial or my bushes, is 30 degrees or 29 degrees. And I see in the forecast that it's going to be like a storm or snowstorm, or it's going to be really cold, like below 29 degrees. So in that case, we can cover the plants. So we can be using some um, it depends the plant. So for example, some bushes, some small plants, you can be using the mulch or straw or mulching, or using these row covers. So something that simple, and that helps to protect the plant. Or even just if the plant is small, sometimes it's easy to be growing some like lettuce, cabbage during the winter. They grow slow, but they can grow. Uh, Put in some of these big, like the water gallons, these big containers, plastic ones. So some people, they just open that, cut those ones in half, and that works to protect two plants. So in that case, the key for that one is to have some air still going into the plant and not completely sealed. So in that case, that helps like for the like a greenhouse effect and help to protect the plant. If not, with fabric, something like this, simple, is not expensive, and protecting the plant. Another way to protect the plants, especially trees, is pruning this time of the year, during the fall, most like the end of the fall, and starting winter, or during the winter, if you can do that. Because in that case, the plant is not producing leaves and not a lot of insects out there. So basically like almost zero insects. So in that case, the risk to have bacteria or fungal infection in the trees, so is way lower. So if you cut or you're pruning during the summer, so there is a high risk to have some diseases in the plant, in the tree. But doing it, or the bushes, so doing it at the end of the fall or during the winter is the best time to be pruning and mulch, pruning and cutting your bushes and your trees. So the final thoughts and resources is that always we need to be planning ahead for winter, spring. So in that case, we learn a couple of these methods to be prepared for next seasons. So for example, there is a question about spring and the soil testing, soil amendments. So it's possible to do it during the spring. Yeah, it's possible. No problem about that. But the thing is, when we do it right now during the fall, before the soil is frozen, so we're doing it right now. We allow the bacteria, fungi, and a lot of microorganisms, just the chemistry of the soil, to be working slowly during all these months. So when the spring comes and now the new gardening season is here again, So the soil is going to be ready for the new plants. So doing it during the spring, it takes at least a couple of weeks to start working. So in that case, the soil is not ready yet for the plants. So that's the difference. It's better to do it right now. Soil testing and soil amendments. And keep a gardening journal. Sometimes, like I mentioned about temperatures, we have microclimates. So what is you something like, I don't know, any plant that for example, you're growing some lettuce and your neighbor can be growing the same seeds and the same lettuce, but because you are like probably higher elevation, um, even if it's just like 5 minutes from your neighbor, sometimes we can see that you can have a lot of snow and it's way cooler and it's too cold in your place, and then just the neighbor is not getting the same temperature. So we get these microclimates, and that affects or benefits your plants. So knowing that and keeping your garden journal, you learn like what plants they do well in your place, which ones they are not doing well, and it's better not to waste money and time and effort on those ones. Uh, so it's always nice to have your journal. And you can always call and send your emails for any questions about fertilizers, about when to start the plants, about when to start the seeds, anything really about gardening for this or any topic, pest control, diseases, etc. for your plants. You always can reach out. Um, if you go to our website, allegany.cce.cornell.edu, you can find next classes and programs and more information about different topics. Um, so that would be it for today. If you have any questions right now, you can ask in the chat. If not, always you can reach out, send your emails, pictures, and we always are happy to help. Um, so any questions right now? Let's check our chat. Okay. Soil testing. Okay, so for soil testing, in that case, like if I understand, so for soil testing, if it's better to do it to get one from the store or do it through the laboratory and how much, it depends. So for Allegany County, so I don't know the other counties, what is the price? It depends about the laboratory. For Allegany County, you can send your samples and we send those to the laboratory, and it's full analysis. It's about $20, at least for 2024. It has been $20, and they test the pH, including the pH, pH, nutrients, and they send recommendations like just an example. Your soil needs nitrogen, so apply nitrogen in a ratio of this per square feet, etc. So they send the recommendations, and you can send multiple samples. So my recommendation is you need multiple samples if you see that your garden it's very heterogeneous. So what is that? Is when you have different patches, like in the same garden or the same area, but if you are growing corn or different plants, even just the weeds, the grass growing, you see that in some areas it's not growing that healthy, in another area is growing healthy, and probably another area of the same garden, um, it's the plants or just the weeds, they are turning yellow or easily affected by any disease or pests. So in that case, you will need like 1, 2, 3 samples. But if not, if everything is a small garden, so or raised beds, you see that everything grows similar, is basically the same soil, so you need just only one sample. And for the pH, so in that case for pH, If you want only pH, we can do the pH testing. That's immediate. Like for the full analysis, we need to wait at least like a week and a half for the results. But for pH, we can do that there. You bring the sample to the office, just about 1 cup of soil in a Ziploc bag, and that's it. We can do the pH testing. That's it. So it's the results. We give you the results, and it's about, if I'm not wrong, it's only $3 per sample. And with Master Gardeners, so every September we have 2 dates every year for free soil testing, soil pH testing. So the Master Gardeners, they volunteer to do that, and so it's for free. 2 samples for free. But any time of the year you can bring the samples, and if it's for pH, $3 per sample, and full analysis it has been $20 for the last 2 years more or less. So it's not that expensive, and you need to do that probably every 2 years, 3 years. If you're doing it intensively, like gardening every year and having a big garden and producing a lot, etc. So every year you can be testing your soil. And yeah, this is the best time of the year to be doing that. Any other questions that we have? Okay, so in that case, because sometimes we can have a question later, and oh, I forgot to ask about this. So in that case, this is my email, or you can go to our website and read more information that we have for soil testing, for soil health, pest management, and many other topics. And thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next class. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.